Welcome to Shareholders of a Better World, brought to you by TBLI Group. At TBLI Group, we have an established reputation as an organization dedicated to building the ecosystem of global sustainability and impact investing. We're doing this through educating, advising, and facilitating transactions in global sustainability and impact business, as well as capital solutions for private companies, family offices, and fund groups. For nearly 25 years, TBLI Group has created a vertically integrated ecosystem of education to action through TBLI conferences and TBLI consulting. More about our company can be found at tbligroup.com. This webinar is brought to you by TBLI Foundation, which hosts educational learning experiences dedicated to a better planet. Through the foundation, we build sustainable communities by sharing the people and the experiences making a difference to so many of our lives around the world. Our weekly podcasts bring impact thought leaders that are doing and not only chatting. Now let me introduce my guest today. Welcome back. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm really grateful because one of my favorite people and one of my favorite organizations, Martin Rich from Future Fit, has agreed to share his genius with us. So if you, in the chat area, you can pose questions and introduce yourself to the others that are joining live and also the others that will see also the replay. So Martin, if you can turn on your, there we go. Okay, perfect. Hang on just 1 second while I do this. Martin, thank you so much for doing this.
Very welcome.
For those who have joined and are not familiar, there is like 3 people left in the world that are not familiar with Future Fit and the work that you do. Just share with us who you are, what you do, what is your big purpose, and also how do you perceive the dilemma around trying to capture true sustainability. And I'll go on mute and turn off my camera so that all of the lights and action will be on you.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, firstly, Robert, thank you so much. It really is a pleasure. Your introduction was far too kind. Genius is definitely overstated. I mean, thank you. I'll take it. And likewise, been a huge admirer of everything you've been doing for many years, longer than I've been in this space. You are the definition of a trooper who doesn't give up. So thank you from me and from all those of us in the sector for everything that you're doing and continue to do to sort of try and shine a light on the work that Future Fit and other organizations are doing as we all try to head towards this better future. Well, it's lovely to be here with you all today. It's lovely to see a couple of names there that I recognize, but a few folks I don't. So hello to you. Perhaps you're 2 of the 3 who haven't heard of Future Fit yet. I think we're only 3. And indeed, hi to everybody who's watching this on the catch up. My name's Martin Rich. By quick introduction, my background, I spent 13 years on the dark side. I was a derivatives structurer and trader at JP Morgan, UBS, and HSBC. That's where my career started, which was a lot of fun. Very, very interesting career, interesting place to work. But around the time of the 2008-2009 subprime crisis, I decided that I wanted to change focus. I wanted to find some real purpose in the work that I was doing. I often say, not that I consider banking to be evil necessarily, but certainly amoral. And I wanted to find something that was, should we say, a bit more directly moral in what it was doing. And I stumbled into the impact investment world in the UK, in London at that time. It was a real sort of hub of the growth of the latest wave, shall we say, of impact investing that we've seen. So I joined an organization called Social Finance, one of the Sir Ronald Cohen sort of mini empire of organizations. Social Finance was sort of corporate finance boutique that created and sold the first social impact bonds. And so my job there was persuading people to invest in these types of assets, which again was very interesting and a real change. But it was through that that I began to realize that the need to shift the mainstream pools of capital and that impact investment, as narrowly defined, was simply not going to do that. I would argue still isn't going to do that. It's an amazing thing. I love impact investment, social impact investment, but they are, in the grand scheme of things, tiny. And so whilst they're serving a great purpose, they're not going to alone change the sort of the tidal waves of the polycrisis, as we might call it, of climate change, biodiversity loss, social inequality, etc., etc. And that was what I wanted to start tackling. My background for banking, I'm an engineer by training. So, you know, to all engineers, everything is a nail to be hit, or a spanner, a bolt rather to be spannered. So, you know, I look at problems like that and I try and say, how can I dive in and fix it? So roll forward to sort of 2013, 12, 13. I began to think about, how do we really begin to sort of tackle these big picture issues? How do we shift the flows of capital? And that's really what gave birth to Future Fit Foundation. And that was when I met my co-founder at the time, and the two of us got into a coffee shop and thought that, you know, maybe two people in a coffee shop with no money, a great idea, and no plans for how to do it could rewrite the entire global socioeconomic system. You know, 12, 13 years later, I'm still here. I'm still trying, crazy as it is. But, you know, we've made a couple of little dents along the way, and that's super exciting. So let me sort of take I suppose, a sort of a step back into what the issues are, and then I can talk a little bit about why Future Fit's approach is different, and why we think we are bringing something to the party that wasn't there otherwise. Now, I'm sure most people listening to this will be very familiar with the big issues, so we don't need to dwell on those. But for me, the money element was always a huge driver and a huge barrier to the change that we all want to see. And the problem really is, again, it's been well documented, but the sort of the short termism and the delinking of the value of business and money to society versus just making money for the sake of making money. That sort of delinkage, I think, is really at the heart of so many of our problems. The purpose of business has become to make money. And funnily enough, Robert, this morning I was talking to Sarah, the CEO of Blueprint for Better Business. And, you know, we were kicking around the fact that the challenge for organizations for businesses is to rediscover that purpose at the heart of what they're doing. Why do they exist? Why does society want them to exist? What is the challenge that they are trying to solve? That really should be at the heart of every business. It's what was at the heart of every business if we roll back, you know, a few decades or a century two in history. The whole point of business was, you know, I was good at baking bread and I had excess amounts of bread. You were very good at digging ditches and had, you know, excess shovels, but you needed to eat and I needed a ditch digging. So, you know, there was an automatic sort of exchange mechanism that came out, but at the heart of those businesses was food or services that were required. And yet over time, and particularly from the sort of 70s and 80s, where shareholder primacy really sort of became the model at the fore, everything became about making money. And even the concept of making money out of making money, which, you know, my old industry is particularly successful at. So with all of those issues coming together, it's no surprise that we've lost sight of this idea of purpose being at the heart of business, and therefore a socioeconomic system where we are not driving toward the betterment of society or planet, and making money as a result of that, because actually we're ignoring those first two bits. We're ignoring those other stakeholders, and we're simply driving towards this idea of profit maximization all the time. Damn the consequences. And we often therefore talk about the need to shift from shareholder value to system value. And again, shareholder value, maximization of profit at the expense of everything else. So you externalize the costs to planet and society in order to focus on internalizing the gains for the organization, for the business. So that model was naturally going to lead to the consequences that we see today. It perhaps wasn't obvious at the time, but taking a step back now and saying, well, if we just keep internalizing, and keep externalizing the problems, guess what? At some point, that's going to go exponential. And when you live on a finite rock circling around the sun, you are going to run out of places to stuff those externalities. You're going to run out of resources. You're going to squeeze everything, into every piece of landfill. You're going to have squeezed everything out of every human being. And that's what we're seeing happening. We're perhaps not right at the very end of that, but we are a long way into it, right? And the whole system is breaking and creaking. And that's exactly why we're getting these massive polycrisis issues that we're seeing. It's the outworking of the system we created. So if that system isn't working, we need the new system. We need to change from that shareholder value to this concept that we talk about at Future Fit of system value, where we put the planet as the key thing that we need to be helping to flourish. And inside that flourishes society. And inside that can flourish business or other organizations. But it's only if we move to this idea of nested dependency that we can get that mutual flourishing. So we move everything back within the boundary conditions, and we start to think about not only not doing harm by not breaching those conditions, but actually by regenerating and rebuilding existing within those conditions, that we can actually have a chance of shooting for a truly flourishing future where business flourishes, but it flourishes because society is flourishing, and society flourishes because the planet is flourishing. We all know that if we keep going on outside those conditions, the planet will break down, society will collapse. And I suppose at the heart of it, as has been said before, there's no business to be done in a dead society on a dead planet. So clearly we need to re-engineer this model. And the concept of ESG that was, sort of first promulgated somewhere around the 1990s, funnily enough, by a gentleman who chairs our organization, a gentleman called Paul Clements Hunt, who ran the team at UNEP FI at the time. They came up with this notion of ES&G, environmental, social, and governance issues. But the idea of that was very much to focus on the financial materiality of those issues. I think it's a term that's been pulled very heavily out of context and is regularly misused these days. And people often sort of, use it as a misnomer for making the world a better place. Well, it's partly to do with that, but it wasn't created with that in mind. The idea of ESG was to firstly to get investors thinking about these other issues and the types of impact it might have on the businesses that they were investing in. It was never intended to be, a single, magic bullet to rectify all issues, as again, sometimes perhaps, people misinterpret it to mean. So I think the sort of that evolution and concept of ESG was very, very helpful and has definitely moved things forward. But again, it was never intended to get to that end point, whatever was meant by that. And actually, that's where Future Fit then came along to sort of step in, was to help define not so much the end point, but the minimum state that we need to get to. If we think again about that sort of idea of those three nested dependencies, some of your listeners undoubtedly will be familiar with the Kate Raworth donut economics model. And Kate built her model off exactly the same system science that we built Future Fit from. And the whole idea of this is to say, well, system science defines those planetary and societal boundary conditions that we need to observe and pay attention to. But the framework that underlies all of our work and Kate's work and indeed Johan Rockström's planetary boundaries, that underlying system science is a framework called the natural step. It's fantastic in describing those principles that give us the boundary conditions, but it's very esoteric. It's a very academic piece of work. It's been evolved over time and it is absolutely brilliant, but it's not designed as a practical piece of work for businesses to pick up. You know, your CEO could come along and she might read that document and she might understand it, but then sort of say, well, yeah, but how do I translate this into my day-to-day activities? How do I promulgate this down through all of my teams to transform my business to look like this? And that was the critical step for us as Future Fit. That was what we wanted to show people, how to make that transition. So if nothing else, take away from today, Future Fit's work, the Future Fit Business Benchmark, is a strategic management tool that shows you how to transform your business from one that is hopefully inadvertently damaging planet and society by dint of being part of today's broken system, and shifting it to become a truly regenerative business that exists within the planetary and societal boundary conditions. So there are three main steps, I think, for making that transition. And the first one, actually, I've already touched on a little bit earlier when I said purpose. I think the first step of this journey needs to be about, why are you existing as an organization? What is your purpose? What is the thing that you are here to solve? What do you know and can do better than other people and other organizations? What is it that you are here to do? And how can you live out every single action and every single product and service that you can provide? How does that shine through, or how does your purpose shine through all of those activities? But if you don't have a clear purpose, a clear reason for existing, you are going to have slid to this point of, well, it's just about making money. At which point it's just about using resources, using people, churning out as much product or service, probably as sort of as poorly but as cheaply as you can get away with, to maximize as much money as you can. That's the old model, and that is doomed to fail. The question is simply whether it takes all of us with it, or whether we can engineer a new system where there's enough of us doing things in a different way that actually there is a rosy future forward for humanity. I believe there is. I know Robert believes there is, and hopefully everybody else listening into this either believes there is, or by the end of this chat will perhaps believe with us that we can get there. We know what this looks like, but we need to get that transformative journey going through as many businesses and indeed cities and governments as we possibly can. So if we think about it in the terms of these boundary conditions, and we think about the purpose of the organization is to say, how do I help society through my skills, my products, my services? How am I helping planet and society move back within these boundary conditions? What is my purpose first and foremost? So if we understand then the why of an organization, then the next question is, well, what do I need to do? And that's where Future Fit comes straight in. We've defined those boundary conditions through a series of actions that you need to do, or indeed not be doing, to be not breaching those planetary conditions or the societal conditions anymore. And that's a suite of goals that we call our break-even goals. This is all published online, freely available, futurefitbusiness.org. Go and take a look at it if you're not familiar with it. But that gives you a framework to start drawing together all of your actions throughout the whole business and embed this into the way you do business, the way you design your products and services, the way you deliver, the way you treat your staff, the way you treat your supply chains, the way you create your supply chains, the way you run your organization. We have a full set of rules of the game, if you like, that show you how to abide by those planetary and societal boundary conditions and shift from where you are today over time. It's not going to be an overnight thing, right? This is a long journey. We need everybody else to be on the journey because we're changing a system whilst we're in that system. But how do you then shift yourself into this space where you are no longer damaging planet and society? And that's the roadmap that Future Fit helps you to create. Now, these are generic rules of the game. We can't possibly have printed the roadmap for every individual business, but we give you the rules of the game because according to the science, they are the same for everybody. The challenges will be different, but the rules of the game are the same. So Future Fit helps you to move in that direction and start setting the strategy for your business and to bring everybody in your business, all of your stakeholders, internal and external, along on that journey with you to be able to say, hey, we're not perfect today, but we've realized where we need to get to. Here's where we're going. Here's how we're changing. And to link it back to that first pillar, here's how we're living out our purpose in everything that we do. And then finally, Robert, and then I'll pause for breath. The third pillar is the idea then of okay, so you've got the why and you've got the what you need to do. Now it's how do you do it? And that's all about change management within an organization. And that's really hard. And Robert, I'm sure there are people in your community actually who'd be great to bring in to talk about this piece. But once you've figured out at least the why through your purpose and the what in terms of Future Fit, now the how do we drive that through everything we do, the messaging, the positioning, the way we go about our day-to-day activities. And that's where the rubber obviously really hits the road. That's where it gets hard. That's where you need to engage your stakeholders and bring people with you on that journey, because that is going to take a long time to change. As you start thinking about how do you move from a linear take, make, waste to a fully circular model, how do you eliminate your carbon emissions, how do you pay everybody in your organization through your supply chains a living wage, etc., etc., etc. How do you shift to that new model and how do you bring everybody on the journey? But that's the important third pillar. So I think I've run through sort of some of the big picture issues that we're trying to tackle, and hopefully given you a bit of a glimpse into how Future Fit is very different to many of the other things that are out there, but actually why it's so important we root everything in the science. As I've said, everything that we've produced is open source and freely available. So we've co-created this framework with experts around the world. We continue to improve it and develop it over time. And we always welcome feedback and comment. We think the framework is pretty good and pretty much right, but maybe you're the one who will spot something that nobody else has, something that we've missed, something that's wrong. If you do, please tell us, because if you've spotted it and everybody else hasn't, then we can encapsulate that and put that into the next evolution of the benchmark. And this is all about finding that journey together. So, Robert, I hope those ramblings were somewhere along the lines of what you wanted.
That was fun. I have a bunch of questions.
Go for it.
So there's, so-called trillions, 50 trillion going into ESG, according to Bloomberg.
Right.
So if that was true, according to reasonable, sustainable criteria, maybe not Future Fit, but maybe something close, why do we have any problem with climate change?
Well, I think you slightly answered the question. If that were true, then we would be making huge strides. And I mean, obviously, we'd still have some problem with climate change because it's a very lagged thing. Even if we turn off the taps tomorrow, right, climate change will be worse in 10 years than it is today. But the reality is that 6 trillion or whatever randomly made up number you want to pull out, might be going into so-called ESG funds. The reality is nothing like that amount of money is actually flowing through to transformative business. I'm quite delighted by a lot of the pushback that we've seen on terms like ESG, sustainability, et cetera, and I really want to see the so-called sustainability tourists in the investment industry called out and quite frankly going away if they're not serious about it. We need to take this thing very seriously. The worst thing that we can do is be handing out placebos that sort of imply to people, hey, your money's being invested to make the world a better place. And then you peer inside the tracker or the fund and you find that, the top three holdings are Shell, BP, and Exxon, or, whoever. It's utter nonsense. So unfortunately, I think, what we've seen on the positive side is a great deal of interest in investing for good, if we might use that sort of terminology. But the reality is that the financial markets, as we both well know, Robert, are very good at dressing various things up as things that they are not. And unfortunately, when it comes to ESG investment, there has been a massive amount of that happening. We are nowhere near where we need to be in terms of capital flows really shifting towards solutions that are going to take us to a sustainable future. And whether that's a future fit, sustainable future, or just a slightly more sustainable future than the very unsustainable one we're heading for, doesn't really matter. But we really need to get serious about what we mean by capital moving into this space.
But for me, I've found that the way ESG is done now, it seems to be like everyone telling all of their friends, I have a membership card to the fitness club of sustainability, but I never go.
No.
But
right.
I want everybody to know I'm part of that club.
Right.
And it's not even about Diet Coke. It's about Coke watered down really a lot. So they find it important to tell their stakeholders, look at what I'm doing. But I don't see where they're convinced that it provides true value.
Right. And I think that strikes right at the heart of where the battle is at the moment, the sort of battle for hearts and minds in this space. Right now, the business as usual shareholder value model still, at least on the surface, appears to be working fine. Why change? You look back over the last 30, 40 years, and undoubtedly, in many ways, that model has produced, amazing returns, both in the financial sense, but also just in helping to lift, millions of people out of poverty, increase access to food and services, and so on and so forth. So, I don't think one could look back over the last 50 years and sort of say, well, shareholder primacy and shareholder capitalism has created no good whatsoever. I just think that would not be a true statement. But what it's not doing, of course, is taking into account the broader impact of what it's been doing. And that has been very negative. And it's managed to go broadly unobserved, at least in the short term, over many of those years. It's not like we weren't aware of these issues or that people weren't, waving flags, much earlier. I mean, it was, what's the famous book, The Silent Dawn? That was written actually just before I was even born. But sorry, don't trying to make anybody feel old on the call here. But it's not like these issues were new, but they just weren't pressing. Whereas now they very much are pressing issues. But that is still taking yet more time to bleed through into the organizations. So I think where the conversation needs to be right now is about the resilience of organizations and businesses going forward, because investors and chief execs of those businesses will be interested in that conversation. I think, if you and I run in through the door with our sort of, Extinction Rebellion, zero carbon flags waving, by and large, we know what sort of reaction we're going to get. But I think if we turn around to CEOs of businesses and say, you are seriously stressed out right now. You have so many pressures piling down upon you. You have so many challenges that you are just ill-equipped to understand and deal with. They're more likely to turn around and go, yeah, Robert, you're not wrong. And if we can say, we have tools that are going to help you to begin to shift your business to be able to be more resilient in the face of an ever-changing world. You know, the next 5 years are going to be so changeable and so complex that it's going to be crazy. But the bad news is, when we get to the end of those 5 years, it's not like we're all going to be able to take a deep breath and go, oh, phew, we got through that period. Now we're back to business as normal. No, the following 5 years are probably going to be even more crazy and even more complex and even more fast changing than the next 5 years. So how, in the face of all of that, do you transform your business to be more resilient? And as an investor, to be finding the businesses and the senior leadership teams that are able to be dynamic and move and respond to, and ideally be as far ahead of these changes as it's possible to be. And I think you and I would be in violent agreement, Robert, that actually the organizations who have found their purpose, who have started to address these mega issues, are going to be better positioned and more able to change and shift. Doesn't mean that some of the, sort of the old guard won't win in various ways, but I think they will find it much, much, much harder to adapt and to change. They will start to lose clients. They will start to lose customers. They will start to lose staff. Perhaps in due course, they will lose the public right even to exist. I mean, if you and I tried to start a slave trading organization today, right? I mean, we would rightly not get very far, ignoring the fact that that's actually illegal in today's world. But roll back into Victorian times, right? I mean, it was, it was considered a very worthwhile and great business to do. What are those equivalent industries today? History and future history will look back and will judge. But the point is that if you can start to be looking at these issues, thinking about things like purpose, thinking about things like how can you adapt through a framework like Future Fit or whatever one you choose, to then be able to address these issues as and before they're becoming really pressing to your organization, you will be more resilient. That ultimately means a better investment for those ESG funds that we're talking about.
Because when we started, our focus was really mainly about capacity building, educating asset owners and managers. And in spite of all of the so-called money flows, I still find that the educational element is still the most important, because people are, most of the financial sector are, they're hunters. Or some are pirates, but in general, they're hunters and scavengers and extractive in nature. So the relationship is, what do I get out of you as quickly as possible? So they have their membership card to the fitness club and they're making their fees, but they're not really motivated by the bigger purpose.
Right.
Which for some investors, I'm not saying most, some investors actually believe, well, if I put some money in climate tech funds, I'm going to actually fix climate, rather than just saying, no, I'm supporting a unicorn chaser, just looking for a unicorn. So it's 2024, and I'm meeting now pension funds that are only starting now to think of some solution there. And, the Dutch are dealing with their 3D model of sustainability, and we're going to work with Ray Dalio because he's really a genius, but he's not doing financially very well. And this lack of education, this lack of really understanding, what are you doing? What is going to happen? I don't see many people. We're still one of the weirdos doing that, which is why we don't accept sponsorship for any of our events, even though it would help pay the bills, but then I have to dumb it down. I've got to eliminate the radical truth. So how
Mm.
do we still push the educational issue of why is this important? Why is this
Yeah.
relevant? I mean, some of the levels of discourse are ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, so much of this, comes back to rediscovering in many ways, like the human heart, the human element within so much of work. What is the purpose of the human?
Mm,
Why do we go to work? Why do we treat each other as badly as we do? How do we start to rediscover some of the humanity, both generally in society? I mean, just look out your window today and, your heart just bleeds for some of what's going on out there.
mhm,
And that's exactly the same in business. We've reduced human beings, sort of through the Industrial Revolution to clockwork machines, right? Devoid of humanity. You clock in and go through your business during the day and you clock out at the end of the day. You're just a thing to be plugged in and plugged out at will. And, then an organization can fire 10,000 people and not feel bad about it because they were just robots, that were there, not human beings with families and all the rest of it. So that, there's a real fundamental disconnect at the heart of all of this, which is a much bigger issue. And the sad truth for it, Robert, to your point on the membership card, I can have as many gym memberships as I want. But if I'm asking you to go on my behalf, guess what? I'm going to die of a heart attack at 55 or whatever. That's not trying to be prescient. Because if I don't go to the gym, or I don't at least get out of my chair and walk around and get some exercise, it doesn't matter how much I tell other people to join the gym. I'm going to get ill at some point. I'm not going to be fit and healthy. And the sad truth at the moment is people still want sustainability to be easy. They want
yeah.
change to be easy. I know you must get this all the time. I get it with Future Fit. We say, people say, break even goals. That sounds great. How many are there? I say 23. And they say, 23? I can't focus on 23 things. I need 3.
You're
I said,
right.
well, mate, I'd love there to be 3, but unfortunately, the world's a bit more complex than that. I mean, if you want me to give you 3, fine, I'll say carbon, water, and biodiversity. There you go, there's 3. And then somebody sort of will say, well, yeah, well, what about living wage? And I'll say, well, sorry, we can't deal with living wage, because we've only got mindset for 3 things. It doesn't make sense. But we need to, rediscover that deeper inner purpose. I'm always reminded in these things. One of my heroes was William Wilberforce, the great abolitionist, and part of that core group that made slavery illegal in the UK and then eventually through the world. He wrote a book at the time about that, and it's a wonderful book. It's well worth reading. It's very, very hard going because it was written in Victorian English. But the title of the book is "The Abolition of Slavery and the Reformation of Manners," which is a gloriously Victorian expression. I love the English
Mhm.
language. But the Reformation of Manners was basically saying, yes, absolutely, we need to abolish slavery. It's a horrific, vile trade. However, what we also need to be looking at is the human heart that actually brought this trade into being and considered it okay to be making vast sums of money trading human souls. And specifically in that Victorian context, was looking at it and saying, Victorian England, Victorian slave traders, you call yourselves people of faith. You call yourself people of Christian faith in that Victorian society. And yet, here you are on a Sunday morning, going to church, and then Sunday afternoon you'll go home via the brothel, and then Monday morning you're going back to your slave ships. Is that really a consistent set of values and actions coming together. And William Wilberforce is quite clear in his book that he does not believe that that is a consistent set of belief systems and actions. So this is not a new issue in that sense. I mean, this was 150, 200 years ago that they were sort of trying to tackle this sort of like bifurcation of what human need, social spirit, and consciousness from the sort of the actions about how we go about living and working on a day-to-day basis. And bottom line is, 200 years on from what the abolitionists were doing and writing about, we face those exact same issues in society today. So it really is about trying to say, find the right way, Robert, to say to people, just buying your gym membership doesn't do it. You got to get hot and sweaty. You're going to have to get on the running machine. You got to do some press ups. And if all of us refuse to do that, the end is not good. The end is very not good. Within 20 to 25 years, potentially, everything that we know falls apart to a potentially, very long-term, irretrievable level. Full extinction of humanity is not off the cards at that point. Or maybe some degree of humanity manages to survive, but what sort of form of civilization and society we have at that point, who knows? That's the worst case scenario, but it's far from a 0% outcome. The reality is, again, we've all got to, start using those gym membership cards, get down the gym, and start doing some work. So for those who are not yet at that point, as we are, we've got to find the right messaging, and we've got to start helping, cajoling, persuading, encouraging, dragging people down the gym.
I agree with you on that, but I find it, we have always had a weird approach. We follow Groucho Marx's rule of thumb for membership, so we won't join any organization that would have us as a member.
Yeah.
My hero is George Carlin, and I just find it shocking how every day I'm confronted with people who want to wear the coat of sustainability champion, but don't want to question anything within the system or speak the radical truth. I remember even that woman from FT, Gillian Trent or something.
Gillian Tett.
Yeah, and I was at a conference and she was asking the audience, anybody have any questions? And they were all constantly bitching about ESG is not good enough. ESG reporting is not good enough. It's not valid, blah, 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 blah. And I said, yeah, that's true. But how come you guys never questioned traditional financial reporting? We had the Parmalat, Enron, WorldCom, Madoff, the financial crisis. Nobody says, oh, this financial reporting really sucks now. We have to be better. But, the slightest thing in sustainability, and her response was, that's not a question. So she wouldn't even deal with it. I wanted to take a couple of comments over here.
And just to share, by the way, we've both been blanked by Gillian Tett at an event. Then that's something we have in common. I once asked a question that was too difficult.
This is a new toy, a new game. So now they call it moral money, for an immoral organization that profited, facilitated, and supported environmental and social destruction. The Financial Times. Kari says that, let's see, I've started to here. From France, I think it's a teaching the purpose of finance is important at business schools, CFA, etc. Just before you answer, I used to teach MBA students at a ranked MBA school at the Rodham School of Management, and it was a horrible experience. They were this was their beekeeping course. They were rushing through. And I said, well, if this is really important for you, you should do what Larry David said to Leon in Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is basically when the recruiter comes to recruit you at your ranked MBA school, you have power then. Turn it around and interview the recruiter to see do they align with your values. Nearly none of them ever did that. And so, yes, I agree it's important to get in the business schools, but I'm very disappointed how few students actually did that, because you have no power when you join an organization thinking you're going to fix it from within. You know, scratching at a safe with a plastic spoon, you're not going to get anywhere. And it was very frustrating, but I agree that it should be part of this curriculum, the purpose of finance. Does it have a purpose other than dying rich as quickly as possible?
Right. You know, look, I agree it is important. But I think there are two things there. Firstly, the fact that it isn't currently taught at, you know, the Harvards, the MITs, the serious schools that are pushing out the, you know, the global leaders of tomorrow. That is a huge problem, because you're locking in 40 years worth of behavior without the knowledge to deal with these mega issues. Now, you know, firstly, that's gross negligence on behalf of the business schools, because how can you be charging people and sending them out with these degrees when they literally don't know what the 4 biggest tidal waves coming at them really are? But that aside, you are sending these people out who will then stay within their networks, all of whom will be broadly ignorant of these issues because they've not been taught them. It's not their fault. They've just not been taught them. So as these issues start to hit their organizations in the future, and, you know, the future is very close, as we know, they will just not be equipped to deal with the emergencies that are coming. That is a huge, huge problem. But what it does mean is that whilst that doesn't negate the need to put these things onto the curricula, we have to recognize that that's probably 5 to 10 years away, even, you know, even if we were successful in making that the case. And you're right, folks like David Pitt Watson do teach this, and, you know, there are some good exceptions to this general rule. But by and large, probably 90% of the students coming out of these schools at the moment don't have this. So even if in 10 years' time we'd completely changed that picture, we'd still have the problem of this full cohort of leaders continuing right into the eye of the storm. So we cannot wait for for education to solve the problem, because if we do, it will simply be too late. On top of that, I think an awful lot of the folks who are beginning to go through those schools now, so you're sort of, you know, your latter end Gen Zs, and beginning, you know, not that many years will be into your Gen Alphas. I think they are just so much more conscious and aware of these issues. I'm not like a Gen Z will save us type of person, but they are aware of these issues in a way that former generations were not. So they will automatically be looking for these things and questioning these things anyway, because they're simply more wired into those types of things. But bringing it back to the leaders of today and the upcoming leaders, I think the question is, how do we as quickly as possible educate them? Because they are the ones who are having to tackle these issues now and in the next 10 and 20 years. They've been to school, so they're not going to go back. How do we get to them? How do we educate them where they are? And how do we help them to facilitate the changes that are necessary? A little bit of that goes back to the comments I was making earlier about sort of purpose and resilience of organizations, and finding these leaders in their moments of distress and saying, hey, actually, we've got some tools here. We know you're suffering from sort of, you know, initiative overload, but we actually have some genuine tools that can begin to help you piece your way through all the crises that you're facing. But again, that is super hard when you're dealing with people who have simply not been equipped, as they should have been 20 or 30 years ago, to be thinking this way and dealing this way. And that is a core part of the challenge.
Do you are you optimistic that I mean, I keep thinking that we're just running out of runway.
We are. Am I optimistic? I guess it depends whether you get me in the morning or the afternoon. Um, Look, I'm optimistic that there can be a route through and out the other side of the catastrophe that's in front of us. I'm not necessarily as optimistic as I would like to be that we will make the wise decisions we need to as a global society to get there. You know, if tomorrow all governments, you know, firstly stopped blowing each other up and actually putting all of that money to sort of better use than killing each other, and announced coordinated global plans to transform us into an electricity and renewable energies based global economy that put people and the planet at the heart of what it was doing, I'd say, you know what, this is actually, yeah, there's a chance we can pull through this because we know what the solutions look like. Most of them. We don't need Star Trek, right? We know what we need to do, and it will be hard and will be a massive shift, but we could make it happen. So am I optimistic in that sense? Well, yeah, hugely. Do I believe for 1 second that, you know, tomorrow, you know, we're going to see, you know, Zelensky and Putin shaking hands and apologizing, or you know, Netanyahu and the Hamas leaders shaking hands, and you know, sadly, no, I just, you know, I don't see that happening as much as, you know, I would dearly love it to. And you know, I fear that the UK may be an outlier to this, but I fear that we are going to see more right-wing governments, more nationalism, more protectionism, and the exact opposite of the radical collaboration that we need. As I say, the UK possibly in 5-6 weeks' time, we might actually be a bit of an outlier and have a more centre-left government, which, you know, maybe that could be a positive sign for the world somehow.
Yeah, well, you know, in the Netherlands, they had
Mm,
far right, and what people don't understand, it's not that Wilders won because everybody has become anti-immigration. That's just the story. It's basically he
mm,
won because people were sick and tired of the failing elite
yes.
of the left in the Netherlands, and that because you don't have chosen mayors here,
Mm.
you're appointed. So these are thousands of cushy jobs that the parties can give out, which they never wanted to democratize. So people see, wait, you screw up there, didn't you screw up there, and now you're burgemeester. You know. Anyway, well, let me take this question. How do you think the European Sustainability Disclosure Regulation, like CSRD, will help drive change, if any?
Yeah, sadly, not to the extent that those who've written them would like to. Um, what I'm seeing right now and what I'm hearing from a lot of friends across Europe is a massive focus by businesses on reporting,
Yeah.
but on reporting, not action. I'm seeing and hearing of um, consulting budgets that are being slashed
Mm.
um, because the money is being spent again on reporting. How do we deal with CSRD? We can't possibly afford to get this wrong. I love the principle. I think CSRD incorporating impact materiality is a big step forward over the ISSB sort of US regulation. I think making companies take this stuff seriously is obviously a really good idea. But I do strongly fear that what we're going to see is 18 months to 2 years of utter standstill when it comes to meaningful change and activity, and 18 months to 2 years of just huge amounts of money and time and effort being spent on reporting. And that is not what's intended to happen. Through reporting, disclosures performance and different stakeholder groups can put pressure. Yes, Eva, I think that's right to an extent, but I would point to the integrated reporting initiative and council. I know the both founders of that reasonably well. And when IIRC and the concept of integrated reporting was first put forward, decades ago now, the idea of that was that integrated reporting would lead to integrated thinking. So people said, okay, people report on finances, so they think about finances. If we get people to report on environmental and social issues, they'll start to think about environmental and social issues, and they'll start thinking in an integrated manner. That simply did not happen, generally speaking. There are exceptions, but by and large, it did not work. It didn't happen. And again, you can go and ask the original founders of that, and they will tell you exactly the same thing. So will CSRD lead to greater disclosure and awareness? Yes. Will that help some companies to start to go, oh, now we understand this, we should think about it? Yes, but I think it's cart before horse. The way we're approaching this as Future Fit is to say to people, look, the right thing to do here is embrace some sort of thinking like Future Fit, to start thinking about your risks and potential for transformation within the organization, come up with a strategy, and then use CSRD to talk about the strategy that you're now implementing within the business. If everybody started to come at it that way, then I think we'd have a great success. Unfortunately, human nature being what it is, people are not putting the strategy first, they're putting the reporting first, and they're spending huge amounts of time and effort doing that and leaving £2.80 and a packet of crisps in the budget to do the actual action. And I think that's the challenge. I would love to be wrong. I would absolutely love to be wrong, Eva. And I would love that in like 3 years' time, you could turn around and go, hi, see, I told you this has led to immense amounts of change across Europe. I would be absolutely delighted, if that's the case, but I don't see that happening right now.
How can this audience that is listening live or the replay, how can we help you? Because it hasn't been an easy time for Future Fit. We have to,
Nope.
be honest about it. You were the one of the best flavors of the month, but people wanted another flavor.
Right.
And how do we help you? Or how can we help you?
Well, thank you. So look, I think, a couple of ways. I mean, obviously, blank checks in an envelope to my home address. That'd be awesome. More seriously, please just tell people about the Future Fit methodology. Go take a look on our website, futurefitbusiness.org. Join our free Changemaker community. Come and see the tools. Come and join our webinars. Tell people that Future Fit exists. Help us get the word out there, because we don't have the marketing budget and everything that we really need. Help people to see where Future Fit can add value. We're not the single answer. We don't have an answer to everything, and we are certainly not the only tool and framework that you need to transform, but I think we can play a critical part in that. So please take a look, tell people about it, help promote us, help raise awareness, because the more people who know, the more people are going to start driving change using the approach. Firstly, that achieves the positive impact that we're trying to achieve as an organization. That's critical. But second, it just helps get the message out there, and the more good stories we have, the more change stories we can point to, the more other people will come on board, and the more we get people starting to think in this way, and hopefully shifting their models. So just hugely thanks again, Robert, for all the support from you over the years, and yeah, to your wonderful TBLI community. Please tell people about Future Fit. Get yourself knowledgeable about it, and reach out to me.
And this will be this replay will be available shortly. Sam will make a short clip taking out the highlights of this and pushing it out through our network and the weekly that goes to 50,000 readers.
Superb.
Or at least 50,000 people who signed up. I don't know if they actually read, but they actually signed up. And if there's anything that when I send out the replay, if you want me to include anything, just text me or send me a mail a PDF or a deck
Thank you.
or a
Yep.
website, whatever you want me to add, I'll add that so people can follow up with you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Really, really, really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for the conversation. Thanks to everybody who joined live.
And keep up the spirits, because we're nearly at the top, even though people keep putting oil slicks on the side of the hill for us to start again. But we are getting through. It's just it's farming, not hunting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're starting to hurl insults at us, and eventually when they do that, they eventually join us, right?
Exactly. Martin, my best. You stay well. Thank you all for joining us. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.